The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brooks Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brooks Show on this, what is it? It's a Tuesday night. I hope you're having a great start of your week. All right, this is kind of the end of the week, it feels like, because tomorrow I'm flying to D.C., going to OCON, the Objectives Conferences in Washington, D.C. I don't know how many people will be there, 400, 500 people, I don't know. So I get there Wednesday night. I'll be there for 10 days. 10 days, God, it's a long time. And going to attend the conference, speak at the conference, be in a few panels, evening events, some great art stuff, and a lot of it's just going to be meeting a lot of people, meet a lot of you guys. Hopefully, you guys are coming, right? You're coming. Hope so. Anyway, talk a lot. Hopefully with you guys, meet some friends I haven't seen in a long time, chat, discuss, debate. It should be a lot of fun. So I hope many of you are coming to OCON. I will be there starting when it starts, Friday night. The conference starts. We have an opening banquet. So looking forward to meeting you, those of you who are going to be there. Look forward to meeting you there. Let's see. So that will mean that the schedule is going to be thrown off a little bit. So I will be doing some shows from OCON. I've got a room there. I'll be doing 3 shows sometime next week. I'll try to let you know in advance when the shows are going to be on, but there will be shows all of next week, or at least three times next week from the hotel, from the conference. If you're attending the conference and you'd like to come and sit in while I do the show, maybe ask some live questions, just hang out, then come by. They'll announce the room and the time and everything, and you'll be able to come and be there live and hang out. That'll be fun. It's always fun to have an actual live audience in front of me as things are going on. So hopefully you guys can come and participate. Keep an ear out for the announcement about when and where that is going on. Jonathan, thank you. Thanks for the support. Jonathan's got us going on the Super Chat, as he often does. And remember, Super Chat goal is 650 for tonight. This will be the last Super Chat of the month of June. So this will close out the month so far, being a super fantastic month. I will be participating in the poker night. I will be playing poker. Last year I did fairly well. Not well enough to win, I guess, but got close. So if you guys are playing poker, that'll be fun. It's always entertaining. Poker's a good time. It's just gonna be fun. What else about DC? Hopefully, if you make it DC, you'll get an opportunity to go to some of the amazing art museums in Washington, D.C., particularly the National Gallery, the Museum of American Art. Both of those are really worthwhile going to see, as well as the many other museums, Smithsonian museums, Air and Space, and others that are there. Valdrin asked, do I have a good poker face? No, I have a terrible poker face. But my poker face says I'm full of expression, so that you never actually know what is actually going on. So I like to rib other players, give them a hard time, make fun of them, claim I have cards I don't have. So I'm the opposite of kind of a cool stone poker face. I'm I'm the emoting face, and you have to figure out what all those emotions mean. But anyway, it should be fun. And I won't tell you what my weakness is in poker, so that you can't exploit it and make money off of it. One of Freeman said the Smithsonian is under renovation. I assume only part of it is under renovation. The Smithsonian is a series of a number of museums. So I assume some of it is under renovation, others are not. I don't know, but hopefully some of them are open, and if you guys and I can go see some of the museums. Should be fun. And of course, there's fireworks on the 4th of July in Washington, D.C. That will be a blast. All right, so today we're going to talk about social media. We're going to talk about a particular essay. The essay is by Jonathan Haidt. Why the past 10 years of American life have been uniquely stupid. I like the title already. Why the past 10 years of American life have been uniquely stupid. So we'll go over this essay, see what we think. I'll give you my impressions of it. I think it's got a lot of interesting things to say. I think, like many intellectuals, it kind of misses the boat on important things, but we can discuss those. So why is America gone so stupid? And here he includes the left and the right. I don't know if you know Jonathan Haidt, but he's, I'd say, left of center intellectual, strong advocate of free speech, strong opponent of cancel culture, and of particularly very good on free speech issues on American campuses, written a number of excellent essays and a book. I can't remember the name of the book, but a book on issues of free speech on campuses, about kind of the snowflake generation, the coddle generation. He kind of wrote the key articles about all of that. Very thoughtful guy, very reasonable guy, and actually participated in a seminar that he did last week. So that partially motivated me to read his article and to share my thoughts with you guys. Okay, again, just a reminder, Super Chat is open. Super Chat is how you ask questions. You can also just use it to support the show, but the combination of asking a question and supporting the show is really good. Yeah, we'll get to that. So we have a goal for every Super Chat. For those of you new to the program, the goal is to reach $650 in every show. We basically achieved that goal, I think, in every show in June. June has been a terrific month from the perspective of raising money over Super Chat, so and supporting the show through Super Chat. So thank you for doing that. Of course, you can support the show as well on YBS.com/support, Patreon, and Subscribe Star. And then you can do it kind of on a monthly basis, and that's called I don't know what Veldrin is talking about. Okay, that's called, that's incredibly valuable when you support the show on a monthly basis. All right. So Jonathan Haidt starts with a metaphor, which I like. It's a metaphor that's going to get me off on a tangent, but it's probably a metaphor that is worth talking about, because it both is shows you the quality of the Jewish Christian God, and also it serves as a metaphor for life today. So the metaphor Jonathan Haidt uses is that of the Tower of Babel. And I don't know how many of you remember the story of the Tower of Babel. How many of you remember it from when you read the book of Genesis? I'm curious, how many of you have read the book of Genesis? How many of you have read the Old Testament? I'd be curious to know. Anyway, in the book of Genesis, we are told that the descendants of Noah, actually, achieve great things, and they are successful, and they are confident, and they are excited. And what they do is they go out there and they actually build a skyscraper. They build a tower that is reaching the heavens. And wow, I mean, this is like, I don't know, 5,000 years ago, and they're building this amazing, really high tower, a feat of human engineering and coordination and work together, and it's quite spectacular. And God looks at this, and he's offended. He's offended. And I'm quoting here, this is Jonathan Haidt quoting the Bible. I assume this is a good translation. I don't know. And he says, look, they are one people, and they have all one language. And this is only the beginning of what they will do. This species, these human beings, this is me now. They have one language, they're one people, they're united, they can communicate, they can trade, they can build stuff, they're making stuff, they're achieving things. And this is only the beginning of what they will do, God says to himself. I guess he's talking to himself. Nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Wow. What a great statement about human beings. Isn't that terrific? God should be super happy. This creature he's created, nothing they propose to do will now be impossible for them. No, but you see, God is a bit of a nihilist. God is a little envious. He doesn't like the hubris of these human beings who think they can do anything they want, who think they can build skyscrapers into the heavens, who think they can achieve all these things and do the impossible on earth. So he says, I guess to himself, come, let us go down and confuse their language there, so that they will not understand one another's speech. So he goes down, and he basically gives them, it makes it impossible for them to understand each other. They all have their own language now. You know, this is anti-globalization, right? This is, you can't trade, you can't communicate, you can't build anything together. And as a consequence of the inability to communicate, inability to work together, inability now to cooperate because they're all talking different languages, they can't understand anything, they falter in the building of the tower. The tower collapses, it goes into decay, it's not clear from the book. But that you get this complete and utter fragmentation of society. Complete fragmentation at the individual level. So Jonathan Haidt is drawing the comparison to the world in which we live today. What we've got is more than tribalism, he tells us. It is complete fragmentation. It's person against person. We live in a society that is hateful, and a society where people are going after each other, and a society where there is very little unity, coordination, trust, common language, the things that are necessary to build, create, make. Now, I think this analogy of a Tower of Babel is a really powerful one. It goes to the idea of disintegration, and it goes to the idea of the importance of concept and language, and the ability to communicate, and the ability to trade, and the ability to cooperate. It goes to the importance of all of that, and I'd say one of the great beauties of the modern world has been ability to, in spite of the fact that we speak different languages, in spite of the fact that we come from different cultures, in spite of all that, the amount of cooperation, the amount of communication, the amount of wealth creation that has resulted from the cooperation and the communication is astounding, and a lot of that is due to what somebody called in the chat the universal translator. But yeah, in a sense, a kind of ability to translate quickly, an ability to maybe have a uniform language, which is English, which is a globalized language, a global language. But more importantly, the ability to translate, and the ability to translate quickly, and the ability, therefore, for us to travel all over the world and communicate with people that not that long ago we would have had a really, really hard time communicating. Now, you know, when I can't communicate with somebody here because I don't speak Spanish and they don't speak English, they pull up an app They speak English, they speak Spanish into the app, and the app translated, and the app speaks English to me, and then I speak English into the app and translate it in Spanish, and it pretty amazing. You can do that in pretty much every language on the planet. Pretty cool. So it's interesting that on one hand, we today have the technology to solve the problem created by the envious God who wanted to put human beings down and created a fragmentation of languages. By the way, that is, I think, the origin of different nations and the origin of different languages. It's kind of a weird story to explain all that, and presents God in a pretty awful perspective. But we have today the technology to unify us, to allow us to understand each other, to allow us to cooperate with each other, to allow us to benefit from trade across 8 billion people around the globe, and to make us all richer as a consequence, to make our lives all better as a consequence, to enhance the lives of almost everybody on the planet through mutual trade and mutual communication and mutual cooperation, and by, in a sense, going back to building the Tower of Babel. And I think that's the path humanity has been on. It's been on a path of greater and greater cooperation, integration, cooperation, building, wealth creation on this upward path. But Jonathan Haidt tells a slightly different story. He says, certainly since the early 2010s, the United States has started completely fragmenting, losing trust in one another. And he blames, for all of this, he blames social media. So I'm going to disagree with him, because I don't think, oh God, Adam Campbell says, Your Bible study is the best. I've always wondered why God never told mankind the earth was round. It never occurred to me it was out of jealousy. Most Christians haven't read the Bible. Ignorance is bliss. Thanks, Adam. And yes, maybe you should do, that's an idea. We should start a Sunday school. And maybe the episode of the Iran Book Show, every Sunday, we should take a passage from the Bible and study it together. And I think that would be hilarious. If we could get a good translation, that would be a lot of fun. And I know many of you, I have indeed read almost the entire Old Testament. I think the five original books, first books of the Bible, I think I've read more than once, and we studied them at school. So we not only read them, we studied them, we studied commentary on them. For pretty much every grade in school in Israel, you study the Bible. There is a Bible class as part of, and you matriculate. In your matriculation, you take a matriculation exam in math and in physics and in history and in English and in Bible studies. Everybody does. It's a required course. So Israelis are pretty well versed in the Old Testament. Maybe that's why Israel is a relatively, other than kind of the nutty religious guys, Israel's a pretty secular society, because they've actually read the book. They can't take it too seriously once you read it. So Jonathan Haidt says, we basically are disintegrating. And I have a lot of sympathy for this, because I think there's a lot of truth in it. We have, over the last 10, 15 years, we have, as a culture, we have lost trust in all of our institutions. We've lost trust in our government, and both sides. Left hates the government, right hates the government for completely different reasons, but they hate it. We've lost trust in our institutions of our universities, our schools, our teachers, and in each other. We don't like each other, we don't trust each other, indeed we hate each other. I mean, the vitriol that the left expresses towards the right. I remember this really came, the first time I really realized this was in an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm. I don't know if you've seen that show. Hysterical show. and really can be really, really funny and really, really embarrassing sometimes. Anyway, this is a show. This is a show. Larry David at the time, I can't remember what season this was, but this is a season where he's still married. He's married to his wife, and I think for their 10th wedding anniversary, his wife says, "You can sleep with anybody. Once you can go out there, find a woman, you can sleep with her, you can have sex with another woman. I'm fine with it. Go do it." So the whole season, he's trying to sleep with somebody. His wife gave him permission. This is the ideal scenario. She's trying to sleep with somebody. Anyway, he finds somebody, right? An actress, I think, and this is in her trailer, and they're making out. And they're about to have sex. And from the corner of his eye, he sees a picture. I think it's of like George Bush, right? And he stops. And he says, "You're a Republican?" And she says, "Yeah." And he says, "I can't have sex with a Republican." And he goes into this complete, like Larry David does, goes nuts over the fact that this woman's a Republican, how should be a Republican? He can't have a relationship with a Republican woman. And, she's like incredibly good looking and everything. And she's just, this is the thing. This is the one time he's going to have to sleep with another woman with his wife's permission. And he can't go through it, not because of anything, not because of morality, not because of he doesn't like her, not because he doesn't love her, not because he's not attracted to her, not because of any of those things, but because she's a Republican. And that's when it kind of hit me. Yeah, there are people who are like that. It's not just they disagree. It's not just that they think the other party is wrong. It's that they literally despise the other party. They literally hate the other side. I think that's the first time it really hit me as an expression in the popular culture, of that. Society's broken apart. And of course, there's a sense in which American society's always had this. American society, certainly pre-World War II, was quite contentious politically. Politics was always, going back to slavery, and it was always a kind of a spiteful and angry, and there were long debates and arguments, and people called each other names going back to the founders. And they didn't agree, but it seems like it's much worse today. And it seems in a sense that it's infected more than just the intellectuals, more than just the politicians. It's all of us. And again, Jonathan Haidt, as we'll get to, blames social media for this. And that it's a distrust of all the institutions. One of the things he mentions is the news, obviously, newspapers, TV stations, and so on. But again, universities and government and all these institutions, we now resent, we hate, we don't believe, we don't trust. And of course, he doesn't say this in the article. I will say it. I think what we've grown most distrustful of is, or put it this way, what used to unite us in spite of all the divisions, what used to be common among Americans in spite of all the divisions, was a particular sense of life, was a particular view of the world that don't tread on me, I can achieve anything, leave me alone, let me be free. So a sudden, and this was true, I think, in the past of left, right, maybe not the progressives, but the thrust of the American people had a deep respect and love for the Founding Fathers, a deep respect of love for America, but a deep respect and love for America, not because of the beauty of the countryside, not because of its religiosity, that's Tucker Carlson's view of America, but they had a deep respect and love for America because it was the land of the free, because it was the land of opportunity, because it was the land of, leave me alone, let me do my thing, let me go and achieve. And and maybe I'm giving you my explanation for all this before we even get to Jonathan Haidt's. That has gone away. That we no longer trust. We don't no longer believe that this is the land of opportunity. We no longer believe that this is a land of freedom and liberty, and with good reason, right? We don't share that view. We're now divided and entitled into looters, moochers, producers. We divide ourselves and have been divided by the mixed economy into fighting over how to divide the so-called pie, rather than going out there and pursuing our dream and achieving and succeeding. We're now squabbling off of the crumbs that are left to us by the welfare state. So if I had to pinpoint the origin of the division in America, the origin of the fragmentation in America, it is the welfare state, and it is the mixed economy. It is the complete disintegration of any kind of ideology. And the horrific way in which we've been taught history, the founding fathers, and the principles on which this country was created. And this is true, again, left and right. This is not, I blame them all. So, yes, on the right you get love of country, you get patriotism, but you don't get love of America. You get love of country. Fill in the blank. But a love of America requires understanding of American principles. It requires the understanding of what America stands for. It requires an understanding of what liberty and freedom are. And that's what we don't have, and that's what's causing this fragmentation. But see, Jonathan Haidt can't see that. And most of the intellectuals today can't see that. Because they occupy the mixed economy. They are the mixed economy. They, these what I consider better intellectuals, certainly better intellectuals of the left, they occupy this mishmash, this convoluted middle, this no principled stand, they can't quite articulate what made America great and what changed. Well, what changed was less liberty, less freedom, greater dependence on the one institution we should not depend on, which is government, beyond our safety. Government. So you see this from all these intellectuals in the middle. They are intellectually a mixed economy, and that cannot hold. And the culture of a mixed economy cannot hold. A culture says, we want freedom, but not too much. We want people to be responsible for themselves, but we also want to give them a robust safety net at other people's expense. We want entrepreneurs, but we want to control them. All of that is completely untenable. And then, of course, there is a reason why we came to distrust our institutions. There is a reason why we distrust government. It has failed over and over and over again. It has failed in every promise it has made. From certainly over the last 50 years, from the war in Vietnam, massive failure, to the war on poverty, massive failure, to the war on drugs, massive failure, to the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, massive failures, to the promise of economic growth, unstoppable economic growth and prosperity, massive failure. Our government has failed over and over and over again. The promise of an uncorrupt government, well, we saw Watergate. And of course, we saw the way politicians have behaved and the way they've gotten rich since then. Massive failure. So there's a reason why we lose trust in institutions, which has nothing to do with social media. It has everything to do with those institutions deserving that we stop trusting them. There's a reason we've lost trust in the universities. Universities have become, and not just over the last 10 years, as Jonathan Haidt would argue. No, systematically over the last 100 years, they become more and more and more captured by one philosophical attitude, view, political attitude, view. Has become less and less open debate, new ideas, less and less respected, less and less treated well. I mean, how many, just as an objectivist, how many times do I hear the story of students telling me that they're afraid to bring up Ayn Rand's name in class? Not afraid because the professor would challenge them, ask them difficult questions. Afraid because the professor would dismiss it out of hand and not even want to relate to it, not even want to comment on it, dismiss them and Ayn Rand completely out of it, completely dismissing the student themselves. And of course, that has become the scope of what is acceptable in universities has shrunk and got narrower and narrower over time. There's a reason we stopped trusting the universities. And what they do teach is often so ridiculous and silly and unintelligible and ludicrous and impractical that, yeah, we've lost trust. And then, of course, there's the media, which is another major source of lack of trust. It used to be that people trusted the media. There was the local newspaper, there was some national newspapers, there were 3 networks, and that was it. And even back then, I question how much people should have trusted the media. Even back then, you could get, out and out communists. What was the guy's name who in the 1930s wrote for the New York Times? I forget. But even the media has become more and more and more biased, more and more and more, even before social media, more and more partisan. Social media has made that much worse, but I doubt that started with social media. It seems to me it started with cable news, but of course cable news, one of the reasons cable news was successful was because it started before that. It just that the only thing that you had was left-leaning media. That's all there was. There was very little anything else. Then you had talk radio, which provided some right-leaning, and then only you got Fox and everything kind of splintered from there. So our institutions, in a sense, deserved the lack of trust. Deserve. Yeah, Walter Durante, thank you. Thank you, Alex. Walter Durante. Our institutions deserve, you can look him up, he's interesting how much influence he had on FDR, on I think many American intellectuals. His portrayal of Stalin's Soviet Union, or Russia, communist Russia at the time, was super influential. You should read about him. Yes, so all these institutions, justifiably, I think, started losing our trust slowly a long time ago. But you see, some of us knew this all the time. Yeah, can't really, you have to be careful when you read the New York Times. You have to adjust. Ayn Rand, of course, would read the New York Times and comment on it and comment on the biases and comment on the way they spun stories. And we all knew this, but it didn't become popular. It didn't become something everybody knew until more recently. So the lack of trust was something that evolved. It's something that has grown and that social media has allowed to explode, allowed to come out and dominate the scene. Because what indeed does social media do? And it's interesting that I hate, and I've seen others do this, they point to a particular moment in time as the beginning of the deterioration of social media. Because if you think about early social media, if you think about Facebook and Twitter in the early, particularly Facebook in the early days, or as though in some other social media platforms before Facebook, the primary thing that they were good for, it was you put up pictures, you chatted with friends, you discussed common interest, it was all free, you connected with people you hadn't connected with a long time. This is a MySpace, right? MySpace. This is a wonderful thing. This is just communication, creating new spaces, new groups of people who share particular values. But what happened is, I think, people would share information about themselves, but it was limited to the people in your group, in your universe, right? And that, in a sense, changed. And it's changed, I think in 2011, right, is the year where everything in social media changed. Because it changed when social media introduced first the like button, so people could come and like your stuff. Then Twitter introduced the retweet button, which basically not only expressed liking the stuff, but now sent whatever it is that you tweeted to everybody that I know and affirmed my support of what you were tweeted. So now I was voting in support of you. Facebook immediately followed with the share button. And as soon as you got the retweet and the share, things just exploded. Now again, these things exploded into a world where we were already losing trust in institutions. But suddenly, you had millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people suddenly participating in what they thought was good, what they thought was bad, what they think was okay, what they think should grow, what they think should shrink. Suddenly, everybody got a vote. And suddenly, it became a game. Who could get more likes? Who could get more retweets? Who could build the biggest audience? Who could get the most subscribers? And how do you do that? Well, you do that through outrage, offense. It turned out that, the things that got the most positive response on Facebook and Twitter were the things that were angriest, the things that were most offensive, the things that took the most craziest stands possible. And suddenly the world started fragmenting into little groups of people angry at other groups and achieving success and fame on the particular social media through attacking other groups. And this, of course, brought out the worst in people. And again, people didn't know what to trust. They didn't know who to trust. They didn't trust anybody, maybe, which left them open to conspiracy theories. It left them open to wacky, crazy, silly ideologies. It made them open to anger and hatred. So what dominated, both on the left and on the right, were a few small groups who took their ideology super seriously, whose ideology became more and more and more detached from actual reality, but who agitated and who started to dominate this public sphere. And that made people who were already distrustful, disagreeable, it made them even more so. It made them more suspicious. Now this whole phenomenon of social media and people using social media to get the news and people using social media to discover the truth and people using social media in a sense as a forum that replaces all those institutions they used to trust. So social media became the place where you went to find out about stuff instead of going to the newspaper, instead of going to TV, or instead of going to a book, or instead of going to anything else. You went on Twitter and asked a question, or you went on Twitter and made a comment. Now, there's something here that's interesting, and I'm going to just talk about this for a second. This is me thinking aloud, if you will, because I find this interesting. There's a sense in which particularly when it comes to media, maybe even when it comes to universities, the 20th century, the 19th century and the 20th century built institutions that were focused around expertise. They were focused around the idea of division of labor in this way. Most of us are too busy, making a living, getting to work, raising families. I mean, particularly in the 19th century, early 20th century, we spent a lot of time at work, a lot of time scraping by, a lot of time getting by. We didn't have time to investigate, to figure out exactly what's going on, to have vast opinions about lots of different things. Most people accepted a certain division of labor where the media were experts. They did their job. They got the news, and we consumed it. And we did our thing. And who has time to question what they're saying? Who has time to figure out biases or anything like that? We're just accepting. And there's a certain sense, the same at universities. People didn't read that much. People didn't know that much. People weren't exposed to that much information. There were experts. Those experts told us. And I think most people just accepted what the experts said in pretty much every field, from the intellectual fields to the sciences to medicine to pretty much everything. But what has happened because of a combination of two things. What has happened because of the combination of more free time, wealth, more time to read, more time to investigate, more time to think. Even for the average person, the work week is far shorter. We have a lot more time on our hands. We have fewer kids. We have a lot more time on our hands. So the combination of having more time on our hands with the internet has suddenly brought vast quantities of information to our fingertips, to our eyeballs, to right there, right in front of us. It's right here. Why do I need the New York Times when I'm getting the information directly from the sources? Supposedly, at least. Why can't I come to conclusions? Why can't I decide? Why? What do I need? What do I need the experts for? And what we've seen is this idea that, well, I have enough time. I can figure out what's true and what's not. I don't need to listen to experts. Everybody can figure this out. We have access to the data. It's right here. It's right in front of us. The internet gives us all this. And it's massive amounts of information. It's unbelievable amounts of information. So information went from being scarce, only the experts could access it, to information being massive. And our institutions fell apart as a consequence. Not a consequence primarily of this, consequence of ideas, but also this. Suddenly, we were looking at stuff and looking at what they were teaching in university, or looking at stuff and reading what they were saying in the newspaper and saying, this doesn't match. And people were doing this across the political and philosophical spectrum. These things don't match. What's going on here? And suddenly everybody thought they could become an expert. You saw this more than anything, you saw this with COVID. Everybody suddenly became an expert in statistics. Everybody was reading studies. Everybody could tell you what a good study was and what a bad study was. Everybody could tell you what drugs worked and what drugs didn't work. Everybody had an opinion about the vaccines. Everybody had an opinion about masks. Everybody had an opinion about everything. How many people are actually qualified to have an opinion about any of these things? Very few. Very few. But the internet, social media, and our time, particularly during COVID, we had lots of time, gave everybody the impression that this isn't hard. Of course, it is hard. It's super hard. And of course, what really happened wasn't that people were looking at studies. People just picked and chose based on who knows what, emotion mostly, which experts they wanted to listen to. But now they had access to 1 million experts. Yeah, many experts got it wrong. And almost all the amateurs got it wrong. Because epidemiology is a difficult field. It requires years of study. Statistics is a difficult science. It requires real study. And it's statistics in particular, particularly probability theory, is super counterintuitive. Your intuition doesn't work when it comes to probability. So everybody becomes an expert suddenly. Everybody has an opinion about everything, foreign policy. You know, everybody, I go on Twitter, everybody knows about tanks. Everybody knows about military strategy. Everybody knows about Ukraine. Everybody knows about COVID, about monkeypox, about everything. Because they read it. They saw a video on YouTube. I saw a video on YouTube, and it says XYZ, and everything's right. So you really get this perfect storm in the 2010s. You get a situation where the institutions are crumbling because of the mixed economy. And again, mixed economy here, also, this is around ideas, a lack of any kind of principled ideas, and to the extent that there are any ideas, they're kind of wacky left ideas. A mixed economy of the soul, and a mixed economy of the economy, and a welfare state. So the institutions are crumbling. We're losing trust in them anyway. And then you get the internet in around 2000, really, mid-90s, early 2000s, just flooding us with information. And then on top of that, you get social media that now takes that information and puts it in bite sizes and allows us to consume only the information from people who agree with us already. So it's reinforcing the ideas that we have, reinforcing our supposed expertise. So when we go and look up COVID, we only see the experts that agree with us. We don't see anybody else. And if we see anybody else, they're presented as, oh, those wackos, those crazies. So we get these echo chambers, these bubbles, however you want to call it. So I think social media has been, over the last 10 years, super destructive in that sense. But it's only super destructive because it came when it came, as all these institutions were crumbling, as we were getting flooded with information, and as we're wealthy enough to have time. To have time to supposedly analyze all this. So, did social media help fragment America? Certainly. I mean, if you go on social media, you can see it. You don't learn on social media. Social media is a forum for abuse. Forum for abuse on the right, a forum for abuse on the left, form for abuse for anybody. Even within objectivism, a form for abuse and disagreement and fighting and arguing, often over things that are so, yeah. But I think that the solution to this, of course, Jonathan Haidt wants to regulate, wants to control. He wants government to intervene. He wants minimum age requirements. He wants to control the like button, maybe influence the algorithm. He wants the philosopher kings to go in there and calm everybody down and calm things down and bring, and that's not the solution. Even in the world in which we live today, the solution is to let it rip. Because this will come to a head, and to the extent that there are still rational people out there, what we're going to find is that what we need in the 21st century is new institutions. The existing institutions are not built to deal with the quantity of information. They're not built to deal with the ability of people and the time that people have and the willingness of people to engage with this information and to engage in discussions. What we really need are new institutions. New institutions that help us filter out, that help us calm the voices, that help us be more objective, that help us deal with this massive information that none of us have been trained to deal with. What we need is to develop backbones to deal with more insult and conflict. People want to cancel you. The question is, what do you do about it? Well, one thing you can do about it is fight back. Refuse to be canceled. But those institutions are going to have to arise, because the current state of affairs, where we don't trust anybody, we don't trust anything, and I'm not saying unjustifiably, justifiably we don't trust the government. Justifiably, we don't trust many of the authorities. Justifiably, we don't completely just trust the media. Justifiably, we don't trust the universities, or at least big chunks of the universities. We're going to have to find, if we're going to survive, we're going to have to find new institutions. And how does that happen? It's not going to happen by through central planning. It's not going to happen by somebody, by me telling you, okay, here are the 3 things that we need to do. It's going to happen through the marketplace. How did newspapers come about? How did newspapers become kind of the objective deliverers of news, which was their intent? That wasn't originally what they were. How did journals, academic journals, develop? How did universities come into being? None of these institutions existed a few hundred years ago. None of them existed in their current form, or the form they developed into in the 20th century. And none of them was centrally planned. All of them evolved in a marketplace through trial and error, through brilliant people taking risks, trying new things, figuring out what worked, figuring out what didn't. They didn't happen because intellectuals sat around and said, okay, these are the institutions we need to build. No, intellectuals went out, they built institutions, some of them succeeded, some of them failed. And that's the beauty of a market. That's the beauty of freedom. What we need today is the freedom to build new institutions. And I think the web is going to do that. I think we're going to do that online. I think social media is a crude attempt at a first step in the direction of building those institutions, but it's not a very good one. So it will ultimately fail, and ultimately institutions, social media is an institution, will be built to replace it. Places where one can have real debates, places where one can really focus on discovering truth rather than on knocking the other side down. But this is not something you map out. This is something that entrepreneurs need to go out there and create and build and make and do. If some of those entrepreneurs are inspired by objectivism, all the power to them. But it's not an objectivist project. It's a project. It's a market project. And indeed, the audience is not objectivist. The audience is the audience, the people out there. So what we need is more freedom, more space, more thought, more risk-taking in the field of building these kind of institutions. Is the university going to survive? You know, University of Austin is an attempt to build a slightly different institution. But the problem is they're building the same institution just with different professors, but it's still the same old university. Maybe there are other experiments out there that are breaking up the university, that are changing the university, that are challenging the university, that are going to challenge that institution and disrupt it. The media is being disrupted by Substack and by independent journalists. And social media will develop as a means of communicating some of those. So who knows in what way all this will be disrupted? But the key is that we have the freedom to disrupt, and the more government regulates and controls, and we don't like share buttons, but we like this button, we don't like that button. Let the button flourish. Let people experiment with buttons. And ultimately, I do believe that the market will provide us with the right kind of balance, the right kind of products. And this is the difference, that the left doesn't trust the market, although they claim to be Democrats, they claim to believe in the people, yet they don't trust the people. What they trust are the elites, the philosopher kings to dictate all that. If there's one reason, I mean, let me just say, I think Jonathan Haidt's article is definitely worth reading. It's really well written. It's full of interesting stuff. It'll get you thinking. You won't agree with it, but if you only read stuff that you agree with, that's boring and silly. So I definitely think Jonathan Haidt's article is worth reading. It's interesting, it's stimulating, it's challenging. But there is a section here that I think is particularly terrific. And Jonathan Haidt actually has written about this more, and that is on childhood, on the fact that what happens and what's happened with, I guess, Generation Z or whatever this latest generation is, which he's done a lot of research on this latest generation, on Gen Z, those born after 1997. He puts a lot of the blame for the state of the world we have today on them, poor kids. It's not really their fault, but they're manifesting it because they grew up protected, shielded. They grew up spoiled, with helicopter parents, with supervised everything. And as a consequence, they can't think for themselves. They're offended by anything they disagree with. You know, they don't know how to absorb new information. Jonathan Haidt has called this safetyism. They're concerned with safety, but it's not just safety from falls, cuts, bruises. It's safety from offense. Yeah, Richard says, Jonathan Haidt co-wrote The Coddling of the American Mind. That's the book I mentioned earlier. That's excellent free speech and on this generation's inability to think because their world is so narrow and anything outside of this world is a threat. It scares them. And of course, they grew up with the internet. And because they grew up with the internet, they're bombarded with stuff. And in order to organize the stuff that they're bombarded with, they form little cliques, little clubs, little tribes. And they lash out. They form little gangs on Twitter, and they try to cancel people. And they get offended, and they get upset. They're the real snowflakes. And I like the part where he talks about free play. Here's a sentence. Unsupervised free play is nature's way of teaching young mammals the skills they'll need as adults, which for humans include the ability to cooperate, make and enforce rules, compromise, adjudicate conflicts, and accept defeat. Also how to think, solve problems. I mean, it's amazing to me how so many intellectuals just ignore reason, ignore thinking. Everything's social. Everything's social for them. But anyway, I've not meant this to be. So kids don't get an opportunity to learn this. They don't get an opportunity to cooperate with others to build the Tower of Babel. They don't get an opportunity to just play and do damage. God, did I do damage as a kid. I mean, the thing I think that really, in that sense, made me who I was, is that I was an incredibly independent kid and just went out and did my thing. Nobody supervised me. Nobody supervised us. None of the kids in my neighborhood were supervised kids. We came home from school, dropped our bag, bye, Mom, see you for dinner, or, or maybe stayed for a little while, did our homework, and then went out. Played soccer in the street with driving cars, formed little gangs that fought one another, played hide and seek in the woods. I mean, we were just out there. Completely independent. Took a bus to where we needed to go. Walked everywhere. Nobody drove us. And I think that has been so crucial to my development, right? That the idea of play, the idea of interaction, but the idea of independence more than anything. The idea that you don't have to rely on your parents and everybody else. Dirtball fight. I mean, I used to fight. We used to throw rocks at one. I mean, we used to literally hurt each other in damaging ways, not a particularly good way. But yeah, it was wild. And this was every day. I mean, there were periods in my life where I used to read a lot, spend a lot of time at home reading, and then my mom would get angry, and she'd like, "You're reading too much. Go play. You're reading too much." That was the way I was brought up. Don't read so much. But I went through this periods of being out there all the time to reading all the time. But I did my own thing. All right. So I think this whole issue of analyzing the history of the last few decades is truly fascinating. I think social media plays a huge role in all of this. And it's played a mostly, a negative role if you look at how people have developed. It doesn't have to be, but it has developed a negative role, a negative place in exacerbating the disintegration, the fragmentation of American society, and the lack of unity, the lack of shared values. There are no shared values anymore. All right, cool. Let's see, quickly scan. Okay, so, we'll shift to the super chat. We have raised about $230. We've got $420 to go. Adam, thank you for the $100. That helped a lot early on. But let's see if we can get up there to the 650, so another 420. Let me start with some $20 questions, and then we'll go on. So questions on anything. It would be great if you asked some questions about what we talked about today, but hopefully there was enough there for you to ask some good questions. Let's see. Okay, Adam. Adam wants to talk about. Okay, Adam says prohibiting abortion means the state using a woman's body against her will. Not for 9 minutes like an ordinary rapist, but for 9 months. Shouldn't we start calling prohibition against abortion a 9 months rape? Yeah, I mean, I don't like using those kind of terms. I don't think it's useful. Rape is an immensely violent act. We need something else, right? But I don't want to diminish the evil of or I don't want to confuse categories. What they're doing is horrific. What they're doing is trying to control a woman's body and telling her how she has to deal with her body, telling her what she can and cannot do with her body, and using it to incubate, babies for the future of the country. This is maybe a way for Yoram Chazoni to solve his problem of shrinking populations and people not having enough babies. Well, prevent them from having abortions. That's one way to do it. But I don't like using slavery to describe every time the government uses force against us or forces us to do things against our will. I don't like using rape to describe something that it's not rape. It's something else. It's a clear violation of rights. It's a clear violation of the woman's autonomy. It's a clear violation of her independence. I don't think that's the way to address it. I get the sentiment, and I agree with the sentiment. The Godfather asks, just reread Lying from Sam Harris and heard your talk on lying. Isn't intelligence gathering spycraft built on lies? If so, how does one recover their psyche from lying in this form? Do you have to? I think it's very, very difficult. So spycraft is built on lies. It's built on lies for, hopefully, if you're a spy for the good guys, for a virtuous purpose, that is the purpose of self-defense. And it's okay to lie in self-defense. And that is why, spycraft is okay. But it's very difficult psychologically. It's draining. It's psychologically causes you to feel schizophrenic because you got two different identities. I think for many spies, it causes them to lose the difference between what's real and what's not, and to sometimes miss it. There's an excellent show, I think it was on Netflix, about the Israeli spy Eli Cohen. I'm trying to see what the name of the show was. I think it was called The Spy, but let me look it up quickly. It's a beauty. Oh yeah, it was called The Spy. I think it was on Netflix. It's excellent. It's a true story about Eli Cohen, who was a Israeli spy in Syria, who rose to a very prominent position within Syria and was the confidant of many of Syria's most significant, people in the military and the Defense Department, and he got to do amazing things, and it was amazing heroic action. But the series is very honest and very real about the real psychological cost that it cost him, and what it did to him. There's another show which is very good. Oh God, I can't remember the name of it. It's about this. What was he? A salesman who used to go, a British salesman who used to go to the Soviet Union during, I think this is the late 50s, early 60s, and used to sell parts and used to do business there. And he got recruited by the CIA and MI5 or MI6, whatever it is, to deliver messages. They found that they had in the Soviet Union a very, very, very high placed KGB official who was giving them secrets. The Courier, thank you, Godfather. The Courier, very good movie, worth watching, with Benedict Cumberbatch, who's a very good actor. I like him a lot. The Courier. And you can see the toll it places on him. He lives a dual life, and he has to lie to his wife because of what he's doing and the cost that has on his family and his relationship, and most importantly, the psychological cost it has on him. So very, very difficult job. Very, very hard to do. Very hard to do for long periods of time. There are ways to coach somebody like that I'm sure the CIA and intelligence agencies go through, but it's rough. It's rough. Oh, which reminds me of a TV show I wanted to recommend to you guys. By the way, so a TV show I wanted to recommend to you guys. Let's do this, as we have quite a few questions. We're already an hour and 15 minutes in. We got quite a few questions. Let's do only $20 questions and up. And we need a lot of them to get to our goal today. We're way behind, so we got $400 to go. But let's just, so we need $20 questions, right? So let's do only $20 questions from now on. $50, $100, thank you, Doug, for $100 question, which I'll get to in a second. But let me give you this recommendation, because we just started watching this. There are only 3 episodes, but there are more coming. It's called The Old Man. And it's we'll see how it develops, because it's still only 3 episodes in, and I don't have a full picture of how this is going to develop and what it's going to become, and what I think of the main character. It's with Jeff Bridges, who and I don't want to give too much of it away. Let me just say it's kind of it's an action movie about an old man who did some stuff in Afghanistan that is now coming back to haunt him, and the FBI, CIA, law enforcement is after him, and he has to escape, and he has to survive, and they're trying to capture him, but some people are trying to kill him. It's really good, and I think it's really good so far, primarily from the perspective of the way it's made. The dialogue is excellent. The pacing is really good, but what's really fantastic about it is the way it's shot, the atmosphere that the director has managed to create, the suspense, the camera angles, unique camera angles that I haven't seen before, the delving into his psychology, the kind of flashbacks where you go back and you're seeing what happened in the past in Afghanistan that got him in this trouble. But you don't know enough yet to really form an opinion. You're getting bits and pieces as the show goes on. Very clever, very well made, dark but super intelligent. And so I'm really enjoying it. It's on FX, I think, so you can get it through Hulu. I'm watching it through Hulu, and it's really good. Yeah, somebody says, I like the Americans. I couldn't stand the Americans because at the end of the day, the Americans glorified Russian spies in America. And I know it was interesting, but at some point I just couldn't take it because I started liking the KGB agents, and I didn't want to like them. Didn't want to like them. But The Old Man, I think, is very, very good. Very, very good. But the Americans does show the difficulty, almost impossibility, of keeping up the lie, and what it does to you psychologically, what it does to you relationship-wise, what it does to you just as a human being. All right, Doug Stangy. Sorry, I'm not sure how to pronounce the name. Now that the floodgates have opened, I have a song review. Oh my God! All right. A song review. Artist is Ariana Grande. I think I like Ariana Grande. Song is Seven Rings. Please analyze lyrics, music, integration. The song lyrics, reflection of the culture, how the song impacts the culture. All right, I'm edit, copy. Ooh, where's my document? I need to find the document. There it is. All right, I will do that. I've got some other. I've got a Star Trek episode. I've got another song, a Nathan Evans song, and this song. Okay, that's my to-do list. If anybody knows I missed something, then so probably won't do these in the next 3 shows. So probably when I get back from Ocon, because I don't know if I'll have time to listen to all these before Ocon, but after Ocon, I'll do that. I think, so those 3. Thanks, Doug. Really appreciate $100. Appreciate the support and the. I'll get to hear a new song that I probably haven't heard before. Nikki, $50. Wow, thank you. How likely is it for the U.S. dollar to cease to be the reserve currency, and how destabilizing would that be for the people of the United States? I think it's okay. So you have to put a time frame on this. So let's take the next 10 years, because I don't know what happens beyond 10 years. I don't even know what happens in the next 10 years, but I can give a probability. I think in the next 10 years, it's super unlikely that the dollar ceases to be the reserve currency in the world. Primarily because there's no good alternative. That is, all the other currencies are just as susceptible to the evils of the US dollar that the US dollar is susceptible to. It's not like the Federal Reserve is worse than the euro. It's not like the Federal Reserve is worse than the Chinese central bank. It's not like the dollar is worse than the yuan. I think overall, over long periods of time, people have come to the conclusion the dollar is better. I think that if we get to a debt crisis where the United States, for whatever reason, is not paying back its debt or is indicating that it might default on debt, then obviously people will rush out of the dollar and the dollar will collapse. Or if the United States actually gets hyperinflation, systemic long-term double-digit inflation, and the rest of the world doesn't have it, then maybe people switch to the euro, or maybe people switch to the yuan, or maybe they get some, sanity and switch to gold, but unlikely. I just don't see that happening. I don't see the United States being worse than any of these other places. I think what's much more likely is a slow erosion in the value of the dollar, but I don't see what's going to be the reserve currency. We need a reserve currency. We need some standard to make a transaction more efficient. There's nothing better than the dollar right now, at least not that's acceptable to the world. Is it going to be ultimately some crypto? Is it going to be ultimately gold? Is it ultimately going to be something else? I don't know. But in the short run, it's not going to be any one of those. And it's still going to be the dollar. And you can see that, at least that's what the market says, because the dollar's at all-time highs relative to the euro, relative to the Japanese yen, relative to, what's the third one? I can't remember what the third one is. I follow 3 currencies. The dollar's strong relative to the euro. Oh, the pound sterling. Relative to the pound, to the yen, and to the euro, the US dollar is pretty strong. In spite of the inflation, in spite of the Biden administration's incompetence, in spite of the Fed's incompetence, in spite of all that, the US dollar is still strong and still reserve currency and still going up in value on world markets relative to other currencies. How destabilizing would it be for the people in the US? Very destabilizing, because not so much because it stopped being the reserve currency, but because of what caused it to stop being the reserve currency. It would only stop being a reserve currency if there was sustained hyperinflation, or if you got default or close to default on U.S. bonds, and those are disastrous consequences, which would spiral the U.S. economy downwards and would create massive economic, financial, standard of living crises. Hard to imagine how bad it could get, but it could get really, really, really bad. So it's not, it stopped being the reserve currency in and of itself. It's what caused it is the real problem. All right, Alex asked, Alex Lovering, I once corrected a friend about what Obamacare was without actually opining on it. Her sincerely wary response, quote, "Are you a secret Republican? The truth didn't matter. Only what the tribe I belong to." Yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately, to more and more people, your tribe is what matters. It's certainly true of the right. The people on the right, if you say anything like, "I'm pro-immigration," well, then you're a leftist. You're a Marx-loving, CRT-loving, Biden-loving leftist. You're despicable, you're horrible, you're a nobody. But I'm pro-capitalist. It doesn't matter. You're pro-immigration. Therefore, you belong to that tribe. You're a leftist. You wipe it all up. You get that all the time. The right is mindless in categorizing anybody who disagrees with anything that they hold as immediately a communist. I've been called a socialist, a communist, a leftist, because I disagree with immigration. But that's the world in which we live. It's the world in which we live. And of course, yeah, the left, the left has its own kind of dogma that you have to abide by. Each side has its own dogma, left and right. That's why I am neither. And you should be neither left nor right. All right, friend of Aristotle. Man, this guy's old. Sorry if this is off topic, but do you consider the Russian debt default worse because other countries are unwilling to take their money rather than Russia not having the money to pay? What do I think of the Russian debt default? I mean, I think that Russia, the debt default, you're saying that other countries are unwilling to take their money rather than Russia not having the money to pay. I don't know if that's the case. I don't know exactly what brought about the default. The default of Russian debt in this context is not that economically meaningful because it is the reflection of these sanctions. Look, the Russian economy, in spite of everything that you might be hearing out there, is a disaster. Quality of life, standard of living is in decline dramatically. The country is having a hard time creating enough to produce and to sustain any kind of reasonable standard of living. The economy in Russia is going to shrink by something like 10%. 10%, take a 10% hit to your standard of living, quality of life. And part of that is the default. Now, the only reason Russia continues to have any kind of economy and to sustain it in any way is because Europe continues to buy natural gas from it, and other countries around the world continue to buy oil from it. So the only thing that's sustaining the Russian economy is natural resources. And unfortunately, there is no complete embargo. There is no complete embargo on natural resources. So the Russians don't sell their oil to Western Europe because Western Europe is boycotting it. So they sell it to India or they sell it to China. They're still getting money from it, so they still have income. But how does that income filter down to the average Russian? It doesn't. The oligarchs are still rich. The oligarchs are doing great. The people in power in Russia are doing fantastic. But the Russian people are in horrible shape. The Russian people are losing everything. And, Russia's a disaster zone. Russia is as I said before, losing this war really on every front, really. Even though they've gained territory, they're losing the war. They might be winning some battles, but they're losing the war. And they're losing it from an economics perspective. They're losing it because NATO is expanding. I don't know if you read today, as I predicted this war almost perfectly. As I predicted, NATO and Turkey have come to a deal where Turkey will not object to the addition of Sweden and Finland into NATO. The Russians have lost because if their purpose was to to hurt NATO or to cause NATO to have smaller borders with Russia. It's not, NATO's not going to have bigger borders, longer borders with Russia. Russia's going to be more at risk. You know, they're losing because they have to mothball T-62s. They have to bring out of storage 262s because they've lost so many 272s on the battlefront that then they have to bring out a tank that hasn't really properly been used in battle since, I don't know, since the 70s. And they're bringing out to the front. Now that the Ukrainians have longer range missiles and have the Western artillery, I mean, it's not going to be easy, and you know, and Ukraine could fail in pushing the Russians back, but there's a really good chance that they get pushed back completely. Anyway, that's Russia's in deep trouble. So exactly the default, the impact that has on the whole picture, I'll read up about it. Maybe I'll have more to say about it in a future show, but I just don't have the context right now. All right, we are 195 short, so we've made up a lot of ground, we've raised $455. We're 195 short. That means, you know, $10, $20 questions will do it. Another song review, $100 for a song review, will get us half the way there. Some $50 questions, like Nikki asked, would go a long way. So feel free to support the show, ask a question, and move us towards our goal. All right, Alex asks, it's not objectively obvious to me that there is a fundamental difference between the unborn and a breathing infant. The clump of cells argument seems incomplete. Were the ancient Greeks wrong in killing an unwanted child? Yes, I think the Greeks were wrong in killing an unborn child. Of course, you know, in their culture, in their context, it's what they did. So, killing an unwanted child has rights. At least as we understand them in modern society. They didn't understand them like that back in ancient Greece, and it was quite often the case that primitive societies back then, but even relatively advanced societies for that period would kill infants. So let me try to break this down again for you. There are multiple stages, obviously, to pregnancy. So in the 6 months, it's not a clump of cells. In the 6 months, there's a fetus there. In the 8th and 9th month, it looks like a baby. It looks like a fully formed baby. It's just inside the mother. 98.7% of all abortions happen before week 21. Before week 21, most of the period before week 21, it's a clump of cells. And there should be zero objection by anybody to abort it, because it's not a human being. It's not formed, it's not viable, it's just not a human being. It's not conscious. I can understand that people are confused about the last few months. When looking into the stomach of the mother, inside there, it looks like a baby. It doesn't look that different than when it comes out. Indeed, as people say, you know, an hour before it's born, it looks the same as when it's born. But this is where the difference is. It's not in the form. The form is the same. It's in whether that form is an individuated human being or not. And what makes it individuated is its separation from the mother. And that separation can happen through birth. That separation could happen through a C-section. But once that it's separated from the mother, it's an individual, separate entity, therefore has rights. An entity that is part of another, an entity that, as Leonard Peikoff says, plugged into another, an entity that is not self-generating, not self-sustaining in its actions, does not have rights. Not by Rand's definition of rights, not by a proper conception of rights. Right? So that's the separation. That's the issue. Tessa, I raised Gen Zs. There was no such thing as just going outside to play after school. I was driving them to soccer clubs, dance classes, and such. Yeah, I know. I mean, I raised Gen before Zs, and it was very much the same thing, and I regret that. And I think, I regret that we kind of create societies around this, right? And I regret that we didn't insist on the kids going out and playing by themselves on play, and that too much of their lives was structured. Right? All right. Richard asks, have you noticed how putting social before a concept diminishes or even ruins it? Absolutely. For example, science, social science. But there is a science of studying groups, right? That's a legitimate science, I think. Social justice, yeah. Social media, yeah. We should also abolish the government declaring war on concepts. Yeah, you can't have a war on inanimate objects. You can only have a war on people. And war is a particular concept that applies to nations, right? You have a war on another nation. You don't have a war on a thing, like poverty or drugs or even terror. I agree completely, Richard. Thank you. All right, Booyah42, $50. Thank you. Hi, Yaron. Thanks for everything you do. What advice would you give to someone who can't find an internal reason to improve themselves? Well, I mean, it seems to me that I'm assuming it's you, so I'm just going to make that assumption. Maybe it's not. But by very asking that question, you're trying to improve yourself because you're trying to find the motivation. I'd say, what's the point in life if you're not trying to improve yourself? Self-improvement is you should be motivated around it because it's the only way only way you can achieve happiness. Status quo, being static, not moving, not changing, and in other words, not improving, is death. It's death by 1,000 cuts. It's a guarantee of depression. It's a guarantee of no happiness. So if you care about your life, and if you don't care about your life, then you really need to figure out what's going on, and it's best to talk to a psychologist. But you cannot stay still. You have to act. You have to pursue values. And the pursuit of values is self-improvement. That's what it means. You have to constantly do better in everything. So if you value life, then you should value your happiness. In other words, a good life, not just any life. And if you value your happiness, self-improvement is a must. It's the only way to achieve any form of joy, happiness, pleasure, success. I mean, sustained pleasure, not momentary pleasure. So, engaging in reason, solving problems, that's all self-improvement. Don't think of self-improvement as a separate thing. It's an essential part of life. Self-improvement is pursuing values. It's pursuing happiness. That's what self-improvement is. It's not a separate issue. It's not over here, and I'm living over here. No, it's life. Otherwise, you're dying slowly. All right, so where are we? 120, good. So just six $20 questions and we're there, or a couple of $50 and 120 and we're there. So not a lot. We should be able to make our goal today. We're not that far off. We're at 530. Goal is 650. All right. Michael asks, Plato and Kant are the only things tearing America apart. It's not helpful, Michael. It's not helpful. It's important to understand the philosophical concepts, the philosophical ideas that are driving it. But if you don't understand the way in which they apply, the way in which they manifest themselves in reality, the way in which they're being acted upon, then you can't deal with those ideas. You can't deal with the reality. And the whole world becomes a floating abstraction for you. So you have to be able to take Plato and Kant and then boil it down, and you have to be able to identify particular causes, particular events, particular behaviors, particular phenomena, particular technologies that are helping, because of these ideas, to tear the country apart. Michael asks, is there a decent chance the Supreme Court will overturn Obamacare in full? No, I don't think so. I don't see on what basis. I'd be surprised. I mean, again, note that in Alito's opinion, there is clearly a disparaging tone towards so-called, in his words, so-called economic liberties. There is no concern by the right-wing judges on this court, by the so-called conservative judges on this court, for economic liberties. At least not in Alito, in his opinion, particularly in the draft. Some of that was edited out later on. Maybe some of the other judges objected. But certainly, I don't think there's I'm not sure if they would overturn Obamacare. And the fact is that Obamacare is not the problem. Medicare is the problem. Will this court overturn Medicare? No. If they overturn Obamacare, nothing much will change. You have to overturn state regulation of insurance, and you have to overturn Medicare, and you have to overturn the government regulations of hospitals. You have to overturn 100 years of regulation of medical services and insurance companies to really, really, really change the nature of our healthcare system. Ryan, for $20. Thank you, Ryan. The view that a viable baby that happens to still be inside the mother is not yet human, and that it's okay to kill it, even if life of the mother is not in danger, in my opinion, completely evades the value and specialness of human life. I don't see how it does, because it's not, again, it's, first of all, let's be clear, almost no such babies are actually aborted. So again, 1.3% of all abortions are after 21 weeks. 21 weeks is borderline viability, right? So almost no abortions happen about that. And when they do happen, it's the mother's life, or the baby is so deformed or sick or whatever that it's not going to be able to live a healthy life. And so almost every abortion at that point, almost no doctor, wants to abort a fully formed, viable baby. And I don't think most mothers do. If they've gotten to this point, they probably want to have the baby. So it's not that there is some cry for abortions in the 9th month. No, nobody wants abortions in the 9th month. Unless a mother's life is in danger or the baby is going to be such. And by the way, if the mother's life is in danger, then they can do a C-section and take the baby. If she still wants the baby, they can take the baby out. So it just doesn't happen. Right? And if the child is so so deformed or so, again, I bring up the Zika babies, which are good examples, then for the sake of the child, because you value the specialness of human life, you want to abort the child. But the issue here is not a moral issue. I agree that it's, abortion's not because of the mother's health or because of a real deformity in the fetus. In the final couple of months are going to be immoral abortions. And you could even argue that it's immoral for the doctor to perform them. It doesn't change the fact that they are legal. Look, I think that it's immoral to beat your dog. I think there are a lot of things that are immoral that the government has no business getting involved in. But again, if the court had come back and said, abortions up until 21 months are fine, after 21 months, because of viability, states can ban them. That was Roe versus Wade, basically. Or the Casey, I think, right? Post-Roe. That's the status quo. But they didn't say that. They basically said it's okay for the state to ban abortions day one. And that is a travesty. Unequivocal travesty. Unequivocal travesty. It's a clump of cells. The states don't want to ban the abortion pill. What's the argument there? There's no viability. There's nothing there. That's the issue. That's the, everybody wants to talk about the late stage, but late stage is irrelevant. Late stage barely ever happens. And it's not what the issue's about. It's about the first trimester, not the third trimester. And the fact is that the people who are opposed to abortion in the first trimester. And that's really where the battle is. There's so few abortions later on. There's so few abortions that are unjustified later on. It's barely not worth the time to think about. Again, it's fine that they're immoral. The question is a question of legality, and that's a question of rights, and that requires a technical review of when rights apply and whom rights apply to. It's not even that rights begin, to whom the rights apply. Whom does this concept, does this idea apply to? An individuated entity, an individuated human being. Ryan continues, after viability, if mother wants baby out, cool, take it out. But to have an abortion, she can't just say, take it out. She has to say, kill it first. Yeah, but there's circumstances where it should be killed. That is circumstances in which, for example, it's deformed, that it's just not going to survive as a healthy human being. But what is viability? What is even viability? Let's say 24 weeks is viability, but it's only viable if you connect machines to it. But what if the mother doesn't want to connect machines to it? What if you can't raise the money? Does it have a right? I mean, is the state going to intervene and pay for it to survive, to put it in an incubator? Who gets to decide? If the mother has has a C-section, the child is out, and the mother walks away because the mother didn't want the child. Who takes care of it? It's expensive. It has to go into a hospital with an incubator for weeks. Charities, I guess, could do it. But what if there's no charity? You just leave it in the hospital floor to die? It's a question of, if the mother wants it, then the mother takes responsibility for it. If the mother doesn't want it, then nobody's responsible for it. And again, it could be immoral to abort the baby at that point, but it can't be illegal. All right. All right, we're $93 away. $93 away. We've made it to 650 every single show in June. Let's not break the streak now. Ryan says, thanks for a great show. By the way, I agree with you about Dobbs' case, only disagree with the after viability issue. All right, Wyatt asks, I've seen some discussion about a discrepancy between Rand's talk on abortion versus her writings. Harry mentioned Rand helped edit the speech for publication. Are those edits available to view from her? I don't know. You'd have to ask Harry, because it was published in a publication that was his. My assumption would be that the edited manuscripts, because they were published through him, would be in his possession somewhere. But I don't know why people are doubting this story. This story sounds, the story is, she gave a speech, and the speech is a little ambiguous, but it sounds like she's saying that once a fetus is fully formed in the womb, it cannot be aborted. It has rights. It sounds like she says that, although it's far from clear. But then when the speech comes out in article form in The Objectivist, I think, which is a publication that Harry Binswanger at the time edited, it says, it basically says clear cut that it doesn't have rights until birth. And the question is, what happened between the one and the other? And Harry tells the story, which sounds completely right to me and completely reasonable to me, that every one of those speeches that Ayn Rand gave was edited for publication. When you give a speech, the writing is not exactly the same as it would be when it's published in writing. I know this amount of time Leonard spent on editing his lectures or his lectures into written form when he wanted to turn them into an essay is unbelievable. The same Ayn Rand, I think, wrote out her lectures in more detail, but still, every one of those lectures, capitalism, what is capitalism, the objectivist ethics, every one of those was a talk and then was heavily edited for publication, whether in a book anthology or whether in a newsletter like The Objectivist. So Ayn Rand took the talk that she gave and she read it again, and she got input from Harry, who I guess was the publisher, and Harry urged her to change and make the formulation more clear about abortion. And ultimately she agreed, and Ayn Rand didn't agree unless she agreed. And she made the change. Now, if you think that when Ayn Rand was alive, she would allow anything to be published in her name that she had not edited and made sure was up to her standards, you're nuts. So Harry wouldn't have made a change to an Ayn Rand speech without getting her permission. And if he had, then she would have caught him because she would have read it afterwards and she would have ripped him to shreds. So whatever you think of Harry or anybody else, doesn't matter. Whatever was published under Ayn Rand's name while she was alive is the definitive statement from her. Because when you give a talk, you edit X times. When you write it down, you edit 3X times, 10X times. Len Peikoff has actually talked about this. So, as the definitive statement of what Ayn Rand said about any issue, it's what did she write, not what did she say. What she said is interesting. It's always interesting. And if there are differences, they're interesting. that she thought this way and maybe changed her mind and why and so on. But the definitive statement of what she believed is in writing. If you want to ask any questions about any of this, the super chat is open. All right, so that's that. Okay, David asks, you probably already commented elsewhere, but I missed it. Please comment on the Series 1 bonds paying 9.6% and the impossibility of paying that rate of interest on the $30 trillion debt as the U.S. debt rolls over. So I don't know what Series 1 bonds are. I mean, I looked at the 10-year bond. The 10-year bond is still at 3%. It's certainly not at 9.6%. So I don't know what is paying 9.6%. Those sound like corporate bonds, not U.S. Treasury bonds, or those inflated. Maybe David, you can clarify, because I'm sorry that I'm not I series. Okay, Series I bonds. Are those inflation-adjusted bonds? Yeah, but you don't have $30 trillion debt paying 9.6%. Most of the U.S. debt is paying below 3%. Almost all of them are paying below 3%. Series I bonds. Yes, okay. So, first of all, if it gets to the point where all of the U.S. debt is paying 9.6%, then the U.S. government is screwed. And they get, it's a spiral, right? Because they have to print more money in order to pay the interest on the debt, which creates more inflation, which raises the interest, and it spirals out of control, right? So right now, the interest rate is still fairly low on U.S. Treasury. It's not 9.6. I don't know where the 9.6 number comes from and what, because again, the 30-year T-bond is just over 3%. The 2-year, I think, is just over 3%. It's between 3 and 4. So most of the U.S. debt, which is short-term, is trading at under 3. And as a consequence, I think right now the U.S. is okay, the government is okay with rolling over the debt. But at some point, yeah, they can't pay it. And that's when you get the real crisis. That's when things collapse. Now, my view is what's going to happen is Republicans will win the House and Senate, or at least the House. They'll cut a deal with Democrats to shrink the deficit, or to limit government spending. And that will help reduce interest rates in the economy because there'll be a certain sense that there's some incentive. We'll see if that happens, but I think that that's going to be how we get out of this. The other possibilities, of course, is that we go into a deep recession. The recession crashes demand because demand collapses, inflation collapses, and again, interest rates will come down again. The bond market seems to think that's what the case is going to be, because the only reason the 10-year bond is at 3% is because they believe that over the next 10 years, interest rates are going to go back to zero very, very relatively quickly. Right? So they believe that the 2% interest rate target that the Fed has is viable over the next, in many of the years over the next 10 years. I think they're wrong, but that's what they think. But yes, as interest rates creep up to 9.6%, we're all in deep trouble. I'll have to look at which bonds right now are paying 9.6, because I haven't seen them. All right, let's see. Hopper Campbell. Do you think universities will start to figure out what ARI is doing and begin to shut out objectivist intellectuals from academia? They've been doing that for years. They've been doing that for decades. I don't see them increasing that beyond what they've already done. It's already been bad for a long, long time. They've been trying to shut it. But in spite of that, we've got Tara at UT, we've got Greg Salmieri at UT, we've got Brad at Clemson, we've got other people elsewhere. So there are plenty of objectivists in academia. Not enough, not as many as there should be, but there are plenty There are plenty in academia. Tips are paying 12.3%. That's amazing. How do you get 12.3% on tips? But yeah, if you bought tips at the right time, you're cruising. You're doing really, really well. That was the right investment. James Taylor, if you became president and had a hostile Congress, you didn't want to work with you, what actions and strategy would you take to shrink government? Yeah, I mean, look, I would quit. I don't understand how you can force people to shrink government. I don't know. I would shut down everything that I could that was at the discretion of the executive. I would shut down. But you can't, right? Because I would veto everything that Congress sent to me. I would basically encourage the government to shut down. But executive orders, you can't get much done in executive orders. Nothing. No, you can't shrink government with executive orders. You can certainly grow government with executive orders. You can't shrink government with executive orders. There's not much you can do. You know, Ludwig von Mises was asked, if you became dictator of the world, what would be the first thing you would do? The great economist. He said, I'd quit. I'd resign. You can't force this stuff down people's throats. And if you're a dictator and you force it down throat, it won't survive. So you can't, in the kind of system of government we have, you can't, if you're president and you also means you don't have a mandate from the people. The people don't want it. Otherwise, they would have given you a Congress that was not hostile. But you could basically cause the government to not function, right? What do they, you could do government shutdowns over and over and over again, but you couldn't do anything meaningful. You couldn't do anything meaningful. And of course, all shutdowns do is they create more uncertainty because the business world doesn't know the regulations in place. Are they not in place? Well, can we do it? Can you do? It's not a good world to be in. What you need is massive legislation that liberates the economy. You can't do it through executive order. Alex Loving says, biblical literacy, whether you're religious or not, is valuable and worth one's effort to develop, particularly Genesis and the book of Job. Yeah, the book of Job, God, what an evil book that is. That is one of the most evil things ever written. And yeah, Christians and Jews love ignoring the book of Job. But we studied it in Bible, in school. The Doodle Bunny says, when are you doing the review of Nathan Evans? Well, I said after Ocon, look, you guys are paying me to do the book reviews and movie reviews, the song reviews, but I can't do them fast. There's too much going on. Can't do them. I'll do them when I can, and these song reviews will all be done after Ocon. That means mid-July. Mid-July. Hopper Campbell, I thought the religious right was a bunch of powerless knuckle draggers, but the nihilistic left has made people turn towards them. Dim summed up, wrong answers are better than no answers. Yes, wrong answers are better than no answers. That's right. The left has no answers. Integration is better than disintegration. The left only has disintegration to offer. That's why long-term they have to lose. It's not a governing philosophy. It's not a governing ideology. The authoritarianism will succeed. Authoritarianism needs a governing idea. It needs an integrating concept. Even if it's only integrating in the short run, it needs something. All right, so we are short $68. 3.5 $20 questions, and we're done. I've got 7 questions to go, so you've got a little bit of time to pull in the $68, but it would be nice if we kept the streak going and made it a full month of making our numbers every single time, even when Catherine is not here to egg us on. Yeah, where are the super chat? Come on, guys. All right. Ashton says, Friedrich Nietzsche said God is dead. I guess now the way things are looking, we can say reason is dead. Reason is not dead. Let's not be overly pessimistic. Reason is struggling. The advocates of reason on the defensive. Emotionalism and anti-reason is on the rise. But it's not dead. Or he says, I thought Treasury interest payments are fixed. If interest rates go up, that just means the price of the bonds is lower. Thus, the fixed payments are now a higher percentage of the price, but the government doesn't pay more. Yeah, if the government financed all its debt with long-term debt, and if the government didn't have to constantly refinance its own debt because the deficits were ongoing, that is, it had to issue constant new debt to pay back old debt, right? So the government is constantly issuing new debt. And one of the things that is so stupid about, one of the things that has been so stupid about government financing, and this is just Finance 101, one of the most stupid things the government has done over the last 10 years is instead of using 30-year bonds to financing the debt, and therefore you're right, Ori, you have 30 years of fixed payments, and really low, because 30-year bonds were really, interest rates were really low on 30-year bonds for the last 10 years because interest rates were close to zero. Instead of doing that, most of the government debt is financed on 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 year bonds. 5 year is long. Some 10 years, some 30 year, but very little. So what happens with the bonds they issued last year at 1%, and they renew now at 3%? Interest payment just went up, right? So every time they have to reissue new bonds, the interest rate is higher on those bonds. And since such a small fraction of government bonds is long-term bonds, they're very sensitive to interest rate changes. Very sensitive to interest rate changes. And this is the mind-boggling stupidity of not issuing 30-year bonds, 100-year bonds, 50-year bonds. The British government in the 19th century issued a 100-year bond. So is that clear, Ori? If you're constantly refinancing, every time you refinance, the interest rate adjusts to the new interest rate. And you have to constantly refinance because they finance the government on short-term bonds, not on long-term bonds. Emmanuel, did you ever walk us through your favorite textbook, books on finance? You said you would post-move. I don't think I ever really walked you through those. I've mentioned some books in previous shows, but I need to pull out some of my favorite books. I didn't bring a lot of the textbooks I didn't bring from California, but I would say any textbooks that's being taught in Finance 101 class is going to teach you a lot about finance that you probably don't know. I mean, most people, you guys might be, you're not most people, but most people don't know much about finance and don't understand much about finance. And any textbook, even just a simple straight 101 textbook, will teach you a lot about it. All right, I will, Emmanuel, I keep promising it, but I will one of these days do a whole show on that. All right. Wow, 2 hours already. Okay. Frank, Pride Month is almost over. Study shows 20% of Generation Z identifies as LGBTQ. When they become voters, is America finished with even more liberals? No, I don't think so. I mean, they're young. They'll change. They'll get jobs. A certain large percentage of them will get better. Some of them will stay crazy, but some of them will get better. Emmanuel's frustrated. He goes, I know, but I have to actually get organized in order to do that and get you the books. I can't just whip them out. They're not just available to my subconscious, ready to go. But there have been shows where I've given some books. I'll find the rest and do that more systematically. So I'm not, They identify LGBTQ, but they'll want families, and many of them will discover that they're actually heterosexual, and they'll experiment with sex, which I'm not against. Let them experiment with sex. Sex is worth experimenting with, and they'll figure it out. Some of them won't. Too many of them won't, and that'd be sad. But I don't blame Gen Zers, and a lot of them are right wing, and a lot of them will become right wing. And I don't think the country is going to be finished because so many people will go to the left. I've said this over and over again. I think this country will be destroyed by the right. Oh, wow. Richard just took us over the 650, so thank you, Richard. Richard C filling in for Richard Z to meet the goal. That's right. Richard Z has been doing it lately. Thank you, Richard Cunningham. Really appreciate it. Thanks for all the support over all these shows. Thanks for getting us over the goal today. Really appreciate it. All right. The Godfather. Have you seen or heard of Tristan Harris? I have not. He filmed and published The Social Dilemma, an analysis on social media. There is overlap here. Would like to hear a commentary on it. Okay, I'll look for it. The Social Dilemma by Tristan Harris. Okay. All right. Let's see. Whoops. Nick. How likely is it for the US dollar to cease to be? Oh, we did that already. All right. Jason, you talked about this on your last show, but couldn't you compare fetus to someone unable to take care of themselves, has a disability and no independence? Not really. Partially, what kind of disability? How much of a disability? To what extent is it debilitating to them? And in certain circumstances like that, people have to take care of you. You can't take care of yourself. People have to take care of you, and you're dependent on other people. And that's a reality. So it really, disability, the whole issue of disability and coma and all these things are special cases. I don't think they're equivalent to a fetus. I don't think they're relevant to the issue of abortion. They're interesting in and of themselves. I don't have anything particularly interesting to say about them. I'd have to think about it. Anyway. Alex, what was your opinion on the Terry Shivo case? The idea that the court would prevent him from this, she clearly was in a vegetative state. Clearly, her husband wanted to, if I remember the Terry Shivo case, clearly he wanted, and he had every right to disconnect it from the machines. They should have disconnected it from machines. The fact that the Florida state passed a law that prevented just Terry Shivo from disconnecting the machines for some ridiculous, crazy religious reason. It was insane. Absolutely. Once you've reached a certain point of vegetative state, you just accept the fact that we have to accept the fact that you're dead and just treat you as such. Keeping you technically alive mechanically is unjust to anybody and expensive. And why should anybody pay it? If somebody wants to pay it, sure, but nobody here wanted this. It was just a religious fanatics or parents or whatever who were completely irrational. But he had the documents that gave him the right to turn off the machine, and they should have just let him turn off the machine. All right. Ryan says, thanks for a great show, by the way. I agree with you. Oh, we read this. We agree with your Dobbs, only disagree about after viability issues. All right. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., I'll be doing a show, 10 a.m. East Coast time. 10 a.m. East Coast time. I'll be doing a show with Ben Baer and Ankar Gate on the abortion issue. It'll be streamed on the Yaron Brook Show. It'll also be streamed on the Einman Institute websites. So that'll be tomorrow. I hope you join us. Hope you come ready with every nuance of every question on abortion or on, as some of you had on disability, however you want to do it. So we'll be doing that. I think we also are going to go on, what do they call that other service where it's audio only, that a lot of the ARI guys use. I forget the name of it. Social media. Anyway, we'll be on multiple social medias. I don't know where it went. Disappeared. Clubhouse. We'll also be in Clubhouse. So we'll be in Clubhouse and we'll be in YouTube tomorrow, talking about every aspect of this issue. So hopefully you join us. There's a pro-choice Republican is winning. Where's a pro-choice Republican winning? In Colorado. That would be amazing. And Colorado's a state that I've spent a lot of time in, debating, arguing, giving talks. All right, great. So it will also post on my regular podcast YouTube channel. It'll post there so you can get it. All right, everybody. Thank you. I will see you from Ocon. Some of you I'll see live in Ocon. Some of you I'll see, I'll do a show from Ocon. But yeah, it's going to be a little tight on shows next week and a half until I get back from Ocon. Thanks again for allowing us to get to the goal. We raised $651 today, just made it in. But that's terrific. Thank you, Richard, for getting us over the hump. And we had a great June, and I will look forward to seeing you all in July. Bye, everybody.